Morning. Morning. So we are with a few more halachas on the subject of whether or not, or to what degree, does one have to be aware that they're fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah as they eat matzah. So let's remind ourselves of the general principles. When a person performs an act of a mitzvah, it has to be identifiable as an act of a mitzvah. It means it cannot be, or it ought not to be, nonchalant. So I happen to have picked up a little of this and put them together. There has to be like something that identifies as a mitzvah. That's the kavanah here. The kavanah here doesn't necessarily mean the person has to understand what the spiritual significance or any significance of the lulav and esrog is, but just an awareness that he's doing the mitzvah. This principle, mitzvah shirchas kavanah, that the mitzvah is required intentionality to be aware and performing a mitzvah, is, at least by the majority opinion, limited to biblical mitzvahs. If the mitzvah is rabbinic in nature, then by majority opinion, we'll see there's the exception, there's the other opinion, but the majority opinion is that rabbinic mitzvahs do not require such intentionality. So if I accidentally stumbled into a rabbinic mitzvah, I fulfilled my obligation, even though I was not aware I was doing the mitzvah. Okay. What throws a wrench into this is the Gemara tells us that when it comes to matzah, at least the implication is that it doesn't necessarily require intentionality. So, as I mentioned, all the commentaries struggle to try to reconcile this. Matzah is a biblical mitzvah. And yet, when it comes to shofar, for example, if a person's walking down the street and he happens to hear a shofar, says, "Oh, that sounds nice." He didn't fulfill his obligation. He has to stop and be aware this is a mitzvah. But when it comes to matzah, if someone like forced it down your throat, you will fulfill your obligation.
Wouldn't you say it's quite apparent, though? Let's say with the biblical mitzvahs that you're doing. I mean, somebody realizes that eating matzah at a table is unusual.
Yeah. I'm hungry. I took a matzah out of my cabinet and know it's Pesach and I ate it.
But why would somebody have matzah?
It's a hypothetical. Okay. You're learning the halacha of hypothetical, not someone who's following the Seder as the Haggadah says to follow, right? So the guy it's a quite hypothetical. Guy was hungry. The rabbi delivered matzah, has no idea what this is.
Okay.
The rabbi actually sent it to the wrong address. But he happens to be hungry, picks it up, eats it. Did he do the mitzvah or not?
No.
We sure? Based on what we said so far, the answer would be no, because it requires intentionality. Right? When it comes to the mitzvah of matzah, at least we're told that if the person was forced, let's say, to eat matzah, without being aware that it's a mitzvah, he does fulfill his obligation. The question is why? Seemingly requires intentionality because it's a biblical mitzvah. Yeah.
Rabbi even said it has to be the right amount of size and the right amount of time.
So the guy did that.
Okay.
He sat on the couch, ate matzah, and that's it. It's not that much and it's not that long of a time. It's a couple of minutes and it's a couple of ounces. This guy's hungry, sat on the couch watching TV while he eats matzah. Yeah?
Right.
So we learned that when it comes to the mitzvah of matzah, there's an exception to the rule that doesn't require intentionality, and all the commentaries struggle to try to understand why that is. Why is it that if the person was forced to eat matzah, so the person certainly didn't do so with the intention of doing it for the mitzvah because he was forced to do so. Right? So did he fulfill the mitzvah or not? So the answer is he did fulfill the mitzvah. The question is why. So we learned on Friday, the Alter Rebbe explains this is a unique approach, which is that when it comes to eating, because the person's body consumed and enjoyed that consumption, the mitzvah is fulfilled. That was the Alter Rebbe's explanation. So how do we understand this? We understood it like this. We have to have an identifiable marker that says the act of mitzvah was done. If the mitzvah leaves no physical impact on the person, puts on tefillin, takes it off, there's no physical impact. Shuk lulav, no physical impact. Heard the shofar, also no physical impact. So what makes that act into the act of a mitzvah? Or what even makes it qualified as an act that was done in the universe? The intention. So you put intention, and I'm taking these four kinds, putting them together for the sake of the mitzvah was done. When it comes to matzah, however, even without your intention, there's a qualifiable, identifiable act that was done. Your body consumed matzah. Consequentially, the mitzvah was done even if he wasn't aware that it was a mitzvah. I shouldn't say wasn't aware. If he didn't do so with the intent of fulfilling a mitzvah. Okay? This is the halach.
Okay. You could nitpick, but
What?
could nitpick, but I say
It's a very nuanced
Same person.
idea, and you can argue 1,000 ways. Our
Yeah.
intention here is to understand the Alter Rebbe.
right.
Right? So if we understand what he's saying, good. Kasha, also good.
Right. Saying because I think Tefillin leaves marks in your hand from the pressure of the straps, and
That's a technicality, it doesn't have to.
okay,
I mean, there's no requirement that says you have to tighten your
Right.
strap so tight that they may leave a mark on your hand.
right.
It happens to do that because that's the best way to put the tefillin on without it falling off.
Uh-huh.
But there's no such requirement.
Okay.
Right? When it comes to matzah, you cannot observe the mitzvah of matzah without having some sort of change in your body. It's just not physically possible. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to consume. Right. So even if you're not doing so with the intention of matzah, of eating matzah, there's a qualifiable act that was done in this universe. Right. The halachic expression is misasek. I happen to be moving my lulav and esrog around and I put them together. Did I do a mitzvah or not?
No,
Answer is no. Why?
this opinion.
Sorry?
In this opinion,
And no, but that's the objective halacha. The
Right.
answer is no.
right.
The question is why? The answer of the why is the opinion here.
Okay.
What's the why? Because he's misasek. Misasek means he happens to have done it. Okay, so I happen to have eaten matzah. Why is happen to have eaten matzah? Yes, a mitzvah, but happen to put a little esrog together, not a mitzvah. So explains the Alter Rebbe. Because when you actually physically consume something that leaves a physical impact in the body, it's no longer called misasek nonchalant.
Hmm.
In other words, when you do something nonchalantly, it's illegally not an act. And that's what's not a mitzvah. There was no legal action. It just happened to have happened. When it comes to eating something, even if you happen to have eaten, there is a legal act that existed. Food was consumed in your body. But if you nonchalantly happen to put an esrog next to lulav and all of the 4 kinds, legally speaking, there was no act done. Because it just happened to have happened. And there's no impact. Unless there's intention. Now I created a legal action. It's a nuanced thing, and I'm not 100% clear. I'm talking it out, trying to get it clear. But there's a lot written on this comment, on this paragraph from the Alter Rebbe, which we learned on Friday, which essentially says what we just finished saying. Yeah, what do you want to say?
Are there any non-food related mitzvot that would also fall in the category of bread
Think,
or matzah?
I don't know. Think, I don't know.
Top of my head, but
Think, I don't know.
Hamotzi,
It's a biblical mitzvah to make hamotzi.
is it? No.
So the only
What
biblical
about-
mitzvah we have nowadays to eat is matzah. The other biblical mitzvah we have to eat. You have a mitzvah to eat your Yom Tov meals, whether that's biblical or rabbinic is a good question. But let's just, even if you say it's rabbinic, but none of the food items on your table are like a biblically mandated mitzvah. You have to eat
Right.
that. Challah doesn't become an object of a mitzvah.
what about
Matzah is an object of a mitzvah.
dunking in the mikvah to purify?
What's the physical impact?
You're wet.
No longer. Tamein.
Yeah, but it's not a
tamein.
it's a spiritual impact.
Right.
It's not a physical impact. You're wet, you dry yourself. That's not a physical impact.
It doesn't
It
stay
is a
with you.
physical impact as well, I think, because it allows you to consume, let's say, truma if you're a Kohen or something like that.
That's a halachic implication because of a spiritual change. Right? The mitzvah itself didn't do anything to your body.
No,
Right?
apparently not.
The-
No.
You dry yourself, it's done. Sorry?
Kept you warm.
Yeah, okay, you dry it. That's not a measurable like
What about Havdalah? Yes, when you make Kiddush and Havdalah.
Kiddush and Havdalah, the cup itself may not necessarily be biblical. The biblical mitzvah is the recitation, which you actually
Havdalah
did.
biblical?
The recitation
Oh.
might be.
Okay.
Let's just assume it is.
Hmm.
That's the recitation, not the drinking of the wine. The drinking of the wine is
Right.
rabbinic enactment,
Right.
which we learned about earlier in Psachim.
By the way, once you mentioned that, I stopped doing Havdalah because I couldn't hold the candle and daven at the same time. It was a bit cause of fire.
Yeah,
So I just read it.
with a cup of wine now.
Yeah, the cup of
Yeah,
wine.
the cup of wine is a
something.
primary Havdalah. You can make what you do is, if you can't do both at the same time, you read it with a cup of wine, and then after you're done Havdalah, you take out 2 matches, light it, and make a bracha.
What about Bechorin during temple time? Bechorin?
So in temple times, there was much more food you can eat.
No, I'm saying
As a
in terms
mitzvah.
of a giving it to the Kohen is a mitzvah, right? You give your Bechorin to the Kohen.
Yeah,
Without intentionality, let's say, there's no eating involved on that.
I don't think that's the same thing as bringing your little Vanessa together.
Yeah,
I don't think so. It's the same thing as This is a good exercise because
Yeah,
it gets better clarity. Moving object A from point A to point B is not the type of physical change he's talking about. Because it's the same thing to the love of an esrog. I moved the esrog from the table to my hands and put them together.
No,
Right? But yet that's not a permanent, not even a permanent, it's not a quantifiable change in the physical reality.
keep thinking.
The only in
Examples other
in,
than food ingestion.
there are none. I don't think there are.
Oh.
And if there are, then we have to further rethink how we understood this because the
Right.
pointless exercise is to carve out eating as a distinct type of mitzvah that doesn't require the same intentionality because of the physical impact it has on the body. Because al-korchach gufnena is whether he thought of a mitzvah or not, his body consumed and enjoyed the mitzvah or gained from the mitzvah.
What about the 4 cups of wine?
It's not a biblical mitzvah. But also, you're giving me food examples, which won't change the definition we gave.
Because I thought that's what we're searching for, more food examples.
No. Food examples, the only other biblical food examples exist in temple times. Nowadays, nothing else exists, biblically speaking. Everything else is rabbinic. More 4 cups of
Not
wine.
the only exception.
The only biblical one. But the point we're trying to make here is, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to understand why, on the one hand, we have a principle which says biblical mitzvahs require intentionality. On the other hand, we say when it comes to matzah, it doesn't. How do we reconcile the two? Answer, because the mitzvah of matzah is eating, and this eating, whether you have intention or not, there's a physical change in your body because you consume that food. Therefore, that act was done even without your intention. When it comes to other actions, without that intent, we don't consider it that an act.
Not checking on
Sorry?
new clothing.
Shechianu is a bracha. Where's the
No,
which
but there's
mitzvah
a
is that?
mitzvah to say the bracha.
No, there is. It's a rabbinic
Putting
mitzvah.
on the clothing.
It's a rabbinic mitzvah. Brachas in general, except for benching, are rabbinic mitzvahs.
No, I
You're thanking
understood that,
Hashem for
but
something.
but
There's
you're
no
wearing
mitzvah to
it.
wear a
Once
new.
you put on clothing, that
Which mitzvah? Okay, break it down. Which mitzvah did you perform? The mitzvah to
I
put on
guess
new clothing?
it's only
You don't have a mitzvah to put on new clothing.
Right.
When you put on new clothing, there's a rabbinic injunction to thank Hashem for the new clothing. Some mitzvah performed there, right?
Well, you
So-
can stay naked.
That's a technicality. You also can't not go to the bathroom. There's no mitzvah thou shalt go to the bathroom,
Right.
right? So even tzitzis.
Same thing.
So even tzitzis is a good example. Tzitzis, first of all, there's no biblical obligation to put on tzitzis.
No.
Is if you have a 4-corner garment, you can't wear it without tzitzis, right? Number one. Number two, the tzitzis themselves are the kinds of mitzvah in which actually the holiness it's less than tefillin.
Yeah.
Because tefillin, at least the leather of the tefillin become holy by halacha, not the tzitzis.
Oh, really?
No.
Because when you look at it, it's the looking at it.
The mitzvah is the placing of it, however you define it. But they don't get the same level of holiness.
Do they
You
go
can
to
take your
Geneva?
tzitzis to the bathroom.
Right.
You take your tzitzis to the bathroom. You cannot take your tefillin into the bathroom.
Right.
Your talis we don't take into the bathroom because it's a designated article of prayer.
Exactly.
And the
You
Taz
don't
writes.
have to.
Sorry?
You don't have to. You can take it off before.
No, you shouldn't take your talis into the bathroom because your talis is a designated davening article of clothing designated for davening.
That's why they say the same thing about the gartel. That reason.
I actually didn't see that, but it sounds right.
No, that's what Moshe Benjamin told me.
Yeah, interesting. I never saw that. That's interesting. That makes sense.
He said that reason.
Because that's the reason why you can't wear your talis into the bathroom. Not because of the
Right.
mitzvah of tzitzis, because you actually the talis called on you could wear it into the
Right.
bathroom.
Right.
Because it's not right.
I asked him, what's the difference between how come you can wear your hat and not the gartel? He says, your hat you wear all the time. Your gartel you only wear when you're davening.
Interesting. That it would follow because I didn't see that written, but it would
Yeah.
follow. Okay, yeah. So the exercise we're trying to do here is to see if there's other mitzvahs that have the same kind of physical impact that food eating has. Right, because we're trying to carve out a rationale here that on the one hand maintains the biblical understanding that you have to have intentionality, where at the same time exempts us from having that same intentionality when eating matzah. What's the rationale we're giving here? Because eating has a physical impact, it's measurable, and therefore it doesn't require intentionality to turn it into an act. The question is, are there other examples that aren't food that also have this kind of physical impact in which which would undermine our little Yaltara's carving of this understanding? Follow? And if there aren't any,
I don't think it would undermine. I would think it just
it would challenge us to rethink it.
broaden
We have to broaden
the
We have
idea
to-
of it, the same idea with the benefit to the body as to matzah with other things. that
Right,
are
but
not-
then you would have to conclude that those brachas, that those mitzvahs also don't require intentionality,
No, not,
right?
maybe, but not.
If you're making a universal rule, it has to be universal, right? So if the universal rule is that when you have an
No, it would
impact,
just- There would just be more of a dichotomy between.
So we'd have to-
different
we have to carve out our
variations,
rationale.
not just one or
so we have to carve out a rationale to make it work.
No, for sure.
That's what I'm saying. But other than food, there are no other mitzvahs like that. Think if you can think of another one, we'll accept the challenge and we'll think about it further. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like there's any other mitzvahs that have the same kind of physical impact, measurable physical impact like food does. Right? Let's look at the language of the Alter Rebbe, the end of of 28. Because even though it was against his will, his body derived satisfaction from eating it, and therefore it's a measurable act. Therefore, even if a person does not desire to eat matzah, and non-Jewish or robbers compelled him to eat it, he fulfills his obligation by eating matzah in this manner because, even though it was against his will, his body derived satisfaction from eating it. Can you say that of any other mitzvah? That there's like a satisfaction that's measurable in this world that turns this act from a nonchalant act into a defined legal act.
What
Other
about
than eating, I don't think there are any others.
what about being with one's wife?
Sorry?
What about
You were forced against your will to do that?
No,
How
not
does that
forced.
work?
saying you were going to do it anyways? You didn't know it was a mitzvah, but now
So was the mitzvah fulfilled?
Not married, this was a mitzvah.
It's a mitzvah of oina. Let's think of this.
But
Is
he-
it- You have to have intentionality when the mitzvah of oina, this is a mitzvah.
We don't say Asher Kishan.
Well,
That's a bracha.
a bracha is rabbinic, and presume well, the reason you wouldn't do that. You know what? I have to qualify what kind of mitzvah that is.
What kind of satisfaction?
I'll give an example because the same obligations you have for oina, you also have to feed and clothe her.
right?
So if I fed her without intentionality that I'm doing a mitzvah to feed her, did I do the mitzvah? It's not one of the 613 mitzvahs, right? Because you make a bracha when you get married, you make a bracha.
Right.
Right?
On
And
Kiddushin.
on Kedushin. Yeah. And why don't you make Shechiyanu?
The chuppah, that's a great question.
So there are actually some do, they put on a new article of clothing. At least for those who don't say Shechiyanu, the reason we don't say Shechiyanu is because the mitzvah isn't fully manifest yet. It's only fully manifest when it's consummation.
Right.
Right? And when it's consummation, one cannot make a bracha because one's in a state that's of what's the word? Person's exposed physically.
Right.
And if one cannot make a mitzvah, make a bracha.
Right.
Right? So but that's not necessarily the mitzvah of oina. I don't know if the mitzvah of oina,
Oina is what? Sorry.
the mitzvah to satisfy one's wife.
Is there a mitzvah to say Eishes Kyle?
No, is it-
About to bear fruit and multiply, or is that?
which mitzvah is that? So,
True.
So, sorry?
Your wife.
True.
oh, so pru revu is a mitzvah there, but then that's
That's after the fact. right?
that's not the same thing as mitzvah of oina. First of all, they're treated from mitzvahs. The obligation to, if it was only a mitzvah of multiply, then a person would not be allowed to be with their wife when they were pregnant, when she was pregnant,
Right.
because there's no possibility of having children when
Right,
she's
right,
pregnant.
right, no.
But there's still an obligation to be with her because there's a
Yeah.
mitzvah to satisfy her, right? Which is why it's
Yeah,
not
that's a
considered
better
wasted
example.
seed, right? Because you're satisfying her as a mitzvah. But that's more of an obligation than it is a mitzvah,
Or,
in the sense that the different types of things as a mitzvah. In other words, you have obligations that aren't necessarily qualify as one of the 613 mitzvahs. Thou shalt satisfy thy wife is not one of the 613 mitzvahs.
Right.
It's your obligations as a husband to
Right.
do so.
not only
So I don't
that,
know if it's even within the realm of the mitzvah we're talking about here that would even need to have such intentionality. The same way I don't have to have intentionality every time I give my wife breakfast.
Right.
I'm doing this now to fulfill the mitzvah of giving my
Under the
wife food, which is the same thing because I have obligation to clothe her, to feed her, give her a house, right? So I don't know that
plus
that's a good one, but I don't know that's a mitzvah in the same way because it's an obligation rather than a mitzvah,
Right.
like one of the 613 mitzvahs.
Because
The
we're
difference
trying to
too
think
is
of
that-
things that would be nonchalant. That
But
end
would
up being
have
what-
but would have a physical
mitzvah.
impact.
Right.
That's also a mitzvah
Right.
as one of the 13 mitzvahs, right?
Oh, as one
One
of
of
them,
the as one of the 613 mitzvahs, yeah,
Right. But Ru is one of them. Is one of
Right.
the 613, no?
it is.
Right.
But you like do your hishtadlus, you do your effort in Puravu. You don't know
Right.
when and
Right.
you don't know which one and what time is going to be
Right.
the Puravu,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
And
Exactly. You're
and
not
the
saying that
mitzvah
this
is
time
actually
going to be that
right,
act.
exactly. And the mitzvah is performed when she gives birth. In fact, if the child isn't viable, it's very questionable whether I did my Puravu,
Huh. Right.
right? Even
Dirty
even with
days.
grandkids, because it has to be grandkids also.
Right.
which also can change the mitzvah.
Right.
So I don't know if there's any point at which the act was done. Now you did the mitzvah. The mitzvah
Right.
is in the result, not in the act.
But
Also,
but
there's no
also,
difference.
too, the difference with the ona is that the satisfaction is not on you who's doing the mitzvah. The satisfaction
It's
is
also
on
the point.
someone else.
The mitzvah is
And
that
that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about
That's
the
correct.
satisfaction
Also,
of
right.
you.
right, the obligation here is
Not
to
for the
satisfy
other
her
person.
needs, not yours. That's correct.
Even
Good
though
point.
that's important. And
That's very good. Good point. Very good point.
it's not the
Right.
same.
Very good point also.
Yeah.
Huh.
Very, very good point as well. Yes. Okay, very good. This is all the Pula Ba'alma, but fun nonetheless. Okay, let's learn Chav Tes. Here the Alter Rebbe gives a caveat based on the Ran and the Ra and others. So it says like this: V'chol zeh, all the above, meaning all the above, where we say that a person fulfills his obligation of eating matzah, even if he's not doing so with the intent of eating matzah. Is kushu yodeya. It's if he knows shalayla zu Pesach. He knows that is Pesach. V'shizui matzah, and he knows this is matzah. Elisha achlosh miskaven, but he ate it without the intent. But shalai without his will. So he was forced to eat matzah. Let's say. It's a really strange hypothetical.
Mhm.
He knows it's Pesach. He knows this is matzah, and he's being forced to eat matzah. Without, it's if he's not eating with the intent that this is matzah, or he's by the Seder night, and let's just imagine this is hypothetical. And he's sitting by the Seder night, and he's going through the Haggadah, and he's hungry, and he forgets. He knows it's matzah. He knows it's a mitzvah to do matzah. He knows it's Seder night. He's actually sitting by the Seder night. He knows it's Pesach. He's hungry, and not even realizing it, he starts nibbling on the matzah that's in his bag.
Bag.
Did he fulfill the mitzvah then?
No, depends when. Depends
Sorry?
when. It depends when he ate it. At what point?
Sorry,
Depends at what point he ate it.
No, but
at any
what's-
point, anytime after that, I'd say.
Consumption is.
You do it. You the fact. Remember, you have to remember this very. We have to remember this when we learn any of the halachas here, which is it's come up before. You can't ask a question based on what you do at the seder, but you do at seder is built on this. So you're asking the wrong way, right? In other words, the mitzvah is done whether we ate it before kiddush, after kiddush, or during the magid.
Uh-huh. It
We
is.
don't do it that way because we have a whole bunch of halachas we have to cover.
Right.
That we have a structure that makes that, but doesn't change the fact that the mitzvah was done, even if you didn't eat it in the right order that
Uh-huh.
the seder that the Haggadah says to do so.
Right.
You have to remember this, right? The Haggadah is built on these halachas, not the reverse.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Right? It's not like these halachas are
Right.
built in the Haggadah. The
Right.
Haggadah is built on these halachas.
Right.
What-
Right.
Yes.
Right. Right.
What's
Excellent
new
point.
in this part? What's new?
Sorry?
What-
Oh,
what's
so that's when we
about this?
say, okay, one second. That's when we say that he fulfilled his obligation. Because he knows there's a mitzvah tonight. He knows there's a matzah tonight. He knows this is matzah.
So even though he had a lapse in intentionality, he still had a foundation of intention.
Oh, his foundation of awareness that there is such a mitzvah and that the mitzvah is tonight and that this is how it's done. He just wasn't- It wasn't intentionally aware that at this moment I'm doing the mitzvah. Aval, but im lo yodea shalayla Pesach, he doesn't even know tonight is Seder night. That guy who got the matzah at the delivered to his house
Well, it's just an emphasis of the point
Yeah.
that you don't even need
doesn't even.
that foundational.
No. 1 second. Let's wait. If he doesn't know that tonight is Pesach, v'achad matzah afilu l'ratzayin, he ate matzah willingly. Don't force him. He ate those delicious matzah. Yeah, he doesn't know tonight was Pesach, but he ate the matzah because he was hungry. V'chein likewise, afilu b'yodei shalad Pesach. He knows tonight is the Seder night. Allah she'yisar v'lechal basar, but he thought he was going to eat a piece of meat. And matzah. And he picked up whatever was on the plate in front of him, thinking it was a piece of flesh, and it turns out to be a piece of matzah. V'achlar, and he eats it because basar, but he eats it thinking that this is meat. Lo yatsa b'chila zu, he did not fulfill his obligation with this eating, because he has to be aware, that tonight is the seder, and there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. Sir, he has to be aware, number one, that there's a mitzvah to eat matzah tonight. And B, he has to be aware that what he's eating is matzah.
Then you gave.
That seems to fly in everything we just learned.
Well,
Right? It does. You're right. It makes it very difficult to understand. So that's what I'm saying. There's a caveat here which makes it very difficult to understand.
Maybe
Yeah.
you once gave an example. Maybe this is not right, but I think remember you gave this example. What's the difference between challah and donuts? It's two same ingredients, but the kavanah when making one is that one's going to be a dessert, and one's going to be a challah,
No, and therefore,
and therefore it changes the entire bracha
which bracha?
from hamotzi to mazonos.
What classification of brachas is that?
We know that's rabbinic. We know that's
No,
rabbinic.
no. What classification of brachas is that?
What do you mean? Oh, hanenin.
There we go. What's it do
Okay.
with mitzvah?
Right.
That's a question of I'm enjoying Hashem's food. You have to know what kind of food I'm eating here. Well, that will depend on what kind of intentionality was there in the making of the food.
But
That's not a question of whether I performed the mitzvah or not.
the person who's making it isn't even the one who's changing the kavanah for the person who's eating it.
No. What's that bearing on this here?
Okay.
Follow it all the way through. No, it's a good point, but follow it all the way through. See how it goes.
I was just saying it's kind of weird that, let's say, that the person who's consuming the food should be the one who's in charge of the bracha. You know, like I'm choosing to eat a fruit, I'm choosing to eat a.
Okay, that's a good point, but like do it like
nothing to do with this. It's a tangent. Okay, all right.
There's even more to say about that, but that's not further.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a caveat that you're right. It's a caveat that throws a little bit of a wrench into everything. Because the rationale we said before is that there's a measurable impact on this world that doesn't require intentionality because, hey, there's a measurable impact. You consume food.
Right.
But nonetheless, Alter was telling us there has to be some sort of basic awareness of this. And the basic awareness, number one, is he has to know that tonight there's a mitzvah to eat matzah and be that what he's eating is matzah.
Hmm.
But if he doesn't know that
He
he's
could be
eating
totally oblivious
to the whole thing,
to the mitzvah.
correct.
He can be somewhat oblivious, not totally.
Well, he's not intending to eat this to do the mitzvah. In other words, so back to the
He sees it's matzah he's eating, not he's seeing a piece of steak and eating matzah.
and that's right.
That's
He thinks he's eating a piece of steak, but he ends up eating a piece of matzah. That's not considered
too
that.
far attenuated.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to make that argument like this. The reason why this doesn't work, even though there's a measurable impact on the world that he consumed matzah, is because in these cases he has a negative intention. He has a negative intention. In other words, let's say I take lulav and esrog, right? I know it's a mitzvah, I know it's today's sukkah and everything else, but I take it with the intention that now I'm not fulfilling my mitzvah.
Yeah, and not be curious.
No, not a Kurtis, because I want to do the mitzvah later.
Oh,
I want to do the mitzvah in the sukkah, let's say,
right.
right? So I pick it up in my dining room with the intent that I'm not doing the mitzvah until I get to the sukkah.
Right.
And then when I get to the sukkah, I can make a bracha.
Right.
Because even though I put it together, technically I did the mitzvah,
Right.
but I have an intention that stops it. The mitzvah wasn't done.
Right.
Right. Same, right? I'll give you an example where it comes up practically speaking. If you're here in Kriyas Torah, right? Later they're going to read the Torah again, and they're going to rely on you to be number 10. But if there's no 10 people there, there's no Kriyas Torah happening there.
Right.
So what do? You want to be part of the number 10 there, or number 6 there, let's say, and you could only do it if you didn't do it here Kriyas Torah yet, but you want to make sure you're here in Kriyas Torah now. What do? You're listening to the Torah reading, and you have in mind, if there's going to be a Kriyas Torah later, then this Kriyas Torah is nothing. If there's no Kriyas Torah later, then this will be my obligation. Right? I can have these kinds of intentionalities. Right? Which means the point I'm trying to make is, you follow that?
Yeah. I have another situation.
Yeah. Okay, so the point, hold on, yeah. What's the point I'm making? The point I'm making is, even when, under normal circumstances, a mitzvah would be fulfilled, but if you have an intentionality that says, I'm not doing the mitzvah now, then the mitzvah's not done.
You're consciously deciding the time.
You're consciously deciding that the act I'm doing now shouldn't qualify as a mitzvah. So I'm going to make the argument, again, I know I'm stretching here, but I'm doing this to make it more neat. In these cases, where the guy thinks he's eating meat, but he ends up eating matzah, he has a negative intention here. My intention is I'm eating meat. So it's as if I'm eating with the expressed intention not to do the mitzvah. And likewise, if I don't even know if there's a mitzvah, and I don't even know if I don't know if tonight's the Seder at all, right? So I'm eating it because I think it's a cracker.
Right.
Right?
Or whatever.
So it's kind of like a negative intention that says, I'm not doing a mitzvah now. It's only when I have a neutral zone, which means I know there's a mitzvah, I know this is matzah. I just don't have the positive intention, I'm doing a mitzvah right now. That's when we say, look, there's a physical impact, and that's it, because there's nothing stopping that. There's nothing in you that stopped the mitzvah from happening. Right? But if there's a negative intention, because I don't even know if there's a mitzvah, or I think I'm eating a piece of meat, so now there's something inside of me that prevents the mitzvah from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
Negative
I know I'm
meaning-
stretching, but perhaps.
Negative meaning
Negating.
Your
Something
whole-
that's negating the act of the mitzvah.
The act.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I know I'm stretching here, but I think this is the
Well,
best way to
hold
make it fit more neatly.
So I think
Yeah.
this is a similar example. Tell me if I'm wrong. What about Friday night? You go to shul, you daven, but you only have in mind taking Shabbos when you make Kiddush.
I'm not. It's a good question. Because you took, let's say, because you davened Ma'av early.
Right.
I'm not sure that would work.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I don't know if you can do that because it's a contradiction
You
in
have to
terms.
follow the seat
Right.
more,
You're making
no?
a bracha of Mekadosh Shabbos in davening. I don't
Doesn't
know.
matter.
Yeah, but
Okay.
an example where that does work is, for example, a person can light Shabbos candles
Right.
early and have in mind that I'm not taking in Shabbos until I'm done doing a mitzvah. We allow you to do that for a mitzvah. So if you have to go to a visit somewhere in the hospital, so you light
Okay.
Shabbos candles. You say, I'm not taking on Shabbos until I'm done getting to the hospital by car.
Provided it's early.
Sorry,
Provided
provided
it's
that
earlier.
before the time.
Right.
Before, yes, that's
Right.
correct.
With the candles, you're only, the intentionality will only come afterwards.
That's correct. We allow you to do that. Halakha allows us to do that for the sake of a mitzvah.
Uh,
Right? In theory, you could do it for anything, but we don't do that
Right.
because it's not respectful to the Shabbos. Just hold it
Right.
back for my own personal gain. But
exactly.
for the mitzvah, I could do that. But you're right. You're correct.
According not to hold up their children, for example.
Right.
But
Whatever the mitzvah is. But you're correct. You can have a negative intentionality to withhold the mitzvah. So likewise here, perhaps
Mm.
when we say that the physical impact that the matzah has on your body qualifies as a mitzvah, even though you had no intention to fulfill the mitzvah, is only when all other things are being equal. But when you have something that withholds the mitzvah, then the mitzvah can't be performed. And in these cases, you do have something that withholds the mitzvah. You don't even know there's a mitzvah that exists at all, or you think it's a piece of meat. So it's like a negative, perhaps. Okay, I want to finish this halacha and the next halacha quickly before we go. I know we're running over time, but tomorrow I want to go back to the Gemara, so I don't want to drag this out too much. So let's continue quickly. However, if you ate maror with this kind of reality, where you didn't even know it was a Seder night, you didn't know this was maror, you thought you were eating a piece of meat, but you ended up sticking a piece of maror in your mouth. Yeah, you also fulfill your obligation. Because maror nowadays is rabbinic mitzvah. And any rabbinic mitzvah does not require intentionality. You don't have to be aware you're doing mitzvah at all. You eat maror because you think it's delicious, or you thought it was a piece of meat, or you don't even know that there's a mitzvah to eat maror on the Seder night. So which means all Jews around the world who are eating salad on the night of the Seder, they don't even know that there's a Seder night tonight. They don't even know that there's a mitzvah of maror that exists, but they ate salad with lettuce to fulfill the mitzvah of maror.
As long as it's fair.
No, as long as it's romaine lettuce. And it qualifies as a thing. So how many thousands of millions of Yidden are doing the mitzvah of maror without even knowing?
Right.
Baruch Hashem. Okay.
And what about Kairech?
You should ask better. Did they fulfill the mitzvah of maror according to Hillel?
Right.
The answer would be no. But good, very good. Okay, those who disagree with this, what men say, there are those who say that even rabbinic mitzvahs require intentionality. I mentioned before, this is a dispute we had in our Gemara. Right? We had this whole discussion in the Gemara. If the guy ate the lettuce during the karpas, did he do the mitzvah of maror? Not during the mitzvah of maror because all he had was lettuce and he needed to do it twice. He ate by karpas, right? This whole discussion. So those are those of the view that rabbinic mitzvahs do require intentionality. Why? Because whatever our sages enacted, they did so in a manner that resembles the way in which the Torah obligations are. And therefore, if Torah obligations require intentionality, our sages come along and say, you also got to have intentionality, at least according to this view. So now, in this view, if you accidentally ate maror thinking it was a piece of meat, you will not fulfill your obligation, and you got to eat maror again with a bracha, according to this opinion. According to the other opinion, which says that rabbinic ordinances do not require intentionality. So if I ate a piece of lettuce thinking it's a piece of meat, I did fulfill my obligation, and I cannot make a bracha when I eat maror a second time. And therefore, it's best to, try to cover as much ground as you can. If I accidentally ate a piece of maror thinking it was a piece of meat, so according to opinion A, I did the mitzvah. According to opinion B, I didn't do the mitzvah. So what do? I eat maror again with the intention of fulfilling a mitzvah, but below bracha without a bracha. Why? Why no bracha?
Yeah.
Because of doubt, right? The principle by brachas are if you're in doubt, don't make the bracha, because you run the risk of making a bracha in vain, Hashem's name in vain. And therefore, because opinion A says you already did the mitzvah by eating the maror by mistake, so you eat it again to cover opinion B, which said you didn't do the mitzvah, but you do so without a bracha, because hey, maybe you did do the mitzvah by according to opinion A. Yeah, clear? Moving a little fast, but we're clear. This should be clear based on all the principles. If it's not, I'll slow down. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, lamed. Aval, but im achal be'inyan zeh belel yom tov shel galius. If a person ate matzah under these circumstances on the second night of Pesach, on the second Seder, why is this relevant?
Second Seder is called Yom Tov Shel Galius.
Second day of Yom Tov that only exists in the exiles.
Oh, okay.
Right? It doesn't exist in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Is this a rabbinic obligation or a biblical obligation, the second Seder?
It's rabbinic.
Rabbinic.
'Cause
And we said before, rabbinic mitzvahs require intentionality or not?
no.
No. So what if I ate matzah thinking it was a piece of meat at the second Seder? Did I do the mitzvah or not? Seemingly it's rabbinic and I should have done the mitzvah. Seemingly?
Yeah.
So it says Al Tereba Avshim with the Sefer, even though the second Seder is only rabbinic, and the matzah being the second night is only rabbinic. So seemingly, if it's rabbinic and I ate it thinking it's a piece of meat, no intention, rabbinic mitzvahs, I'm just done.
Right.
Nonetheless, everybody agrees you got to eat it again with a bracha.
Right.
Why? We have a principle that runs across the board, which is we do not treat second day Yom Tif in any way different than day one of Yom Tif.
Mhm.
Our sages put that firm flag on day two of Yom Tif, second day Yom Tif, that it should not be bent in any way just because it's rabbinic.
Right.
Why?
Just like-
It shouldn't be treated lightly.
Right.
You don't come to disdain.
No, you
Sorry?
don't treat it like it's inferior just because it's second day.
Correct?
Inferiority.
That's right. You don't want it to be treated thusly. Okay, I want to do one more halacha. I'm sorry, I know I'm running late. Misha achal mat, because then we'll close out the subject. It's lat halacha, and it's something you mentioned a couple of days ago. Misha achal matzah kashur nichbeh. If a person eats matzah while he's in nichbeh means like epileptic. He's like seizing.
Well,
Be'ish tusai, at the moment during his doesn't have control over his body, and during that time he ate matzah. Let's say he started eating matzah.
and he had
And
his
he had a fit.
epileptic
He
attack.
had a fit,
Huh.
and the matzah got consumed. V'achach nisrapa. And then he regains his health.
Wow.
They give him, what do they give it to somebody?
Epinephrine.
Whatever, they give him something that brings him back to himself. Chayav lechol achash nisrapa. He's got to eat the matzah again while he's now healthy. Why?
Hmm.
Because the first time he ate, he was at a time when he's completely exempt of all
Wow.
mitzvahs.
Heavy.
At the time when he was in that fit, he's exempt from all mitzvahs, and therefore he's got to do the mitzvah again. He becomes healthy. It was something you brought up that was similar. It's connected to the intentionality. Good day. Sorry, went over time today.
Satisfaction when you eat it.
Oh, that's right.
You satisfied, so you
Oh.
fulfilled. That's why. You're
Oh,
like,
no,
"Ah."
that's right. But if he says no, because you weren't exempt, you were not obligated at that time.
Maybe it's because he's under the category of being completely negated in the intentionality.
He doesn't say that though.
Because
says
that
the
would
fish
be
shachir-
more what I would think.
Yeah,
would be the
The
reason.
rationale is that when he first ate the matzah, he was exempt from all mitzvahs.
But that wouldn't satisfy the satisfaction component, because even if you're
Yeah.
exempt, you would have done. it.
That's right. Yeah, good point.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Well, one can have a fun time with this. Okay, wonderful day, Eden. Tomorrow, God willing, get back to the Gemara. And back to the Gemara, God willing. Good day, Eden.
It's a very good exercise for testing intentionality and ensuring that it's conscious. When we have, we do